welcome to the Tuesday, February 8th regular meeting of the Board of County Commissioners. My personal apologies. Our technology was behind us a little bit this morning, and we are a minute or two late beginning the meeting. We're all present today. Commissioner Bozovic, we will not see his video. Commissioner Bozovic is with us audio only. First item on today's agenda is adjustments to the agenda. Mr. Mokrahysky, do we have any adjustments to the agenda?
No adjustments from staff.
Thank you, sir. And any from the board? I hear none. Moving along to emergency business, Mr. Mokrahysky.
No emergency business.
And to the board, I see no emergency business. Then today we'll move directly into public comments. And I'll mention the same thing I mentioned last week. I'm going to read verbatim the script that has been present at every board meeting as far back as I can remember. I'm going to read it verbatim. Today we'll be restricting public comment to 3 minutes, to 3 minutes. And I will give you a warning right at 15 seconds to summarize. At 3 minutes, the mic will be silenced and we'll move along to the next speaker. And Ms. Jones will queue up the next speaker. So speakers will be taken in order in which they sign up and be limited to 3 minutes per public comments. If the number wishing to testify exceeds 10 speakers, then additional speakers may be allowed if the chair determines that time permits or may be taken at a later time. When there's an additional opportunity for public comments and for public comment in the afternoon, speakers will only be permitted to offer public comment on a specific topic on the same day. And as ever, if you wish to submit written comment, please send an email to dianajones@lanecounty.gov, and that is on our website. And if you move to our website, today's agenda, this is all listed. In the email, should you send public comments, please include public comment from meeting and today's date in the heading. At this point, we'll move along to public comments. Ms. Jones, do we have anyone signed up for public comment?
Thank you, Chair Farr. I do see quite a few attendees out there. At this time, if you would like to be called on for public comment, please raise your virtual hand and I will call you in the order the hands are raised. I will begin our public comment with Danny, followed by Elizabeth Cable. Danny, I will unmute your microphone and start the time. Well, actually, let me give, I'm going to change to the timer. So I will unmute your microphone, and when you see the timer start, you may begin your presentation. 1 moment.
I'll say good morning in the meantime. All right. George Washington stated, quote, "Truth will ultimately prevail when there is pains taken to bring it to light," end quote. OHA decided to overstep their authority and filed all 3 rules. They tried to avoid social revolt by saying that they will lift the rule by March 31st. Understand that we got tricked by the government and pharma in the last 2 years over and over. I have been keeping track and showing you evidence. I don't know who Governor Craig Brown and OHA, a bunch of unqualified characters, think that they are, but for sure they are nobody with power over medical choices. What they're doing goes against our natural rights and supreme law of this land, the Constitution. We have also a team of ding-dongs at the presidential administration destroying this nation from within. But remember, in this land, the government is under the authority of the people. I am not afraid of COVID. I'm now vaccinated. I recently got COVID. I did very well. I will continue to do with my body as I please. I do things to stay healthy, and I will not wear a mask. I also will not pay the fine if I get fined. The fact that Oregon is pushing for more restrictions now is ridiculous and a waste of everybody's time, energy, and money. This state is being turned into a communist territory. I have 2 requests. The first one is very important to the Lane County Commissioners. We know that you have the authority to shield the Lane County residents from the state unnecessary rule that proposes to fine us $500 per day of non-compliance. You can decide to trust in people's ability to make informed medical choices. You have made all the options and the information available. You can decide to not enforce a state rule, just like Douglas County did last night. There must be a limit. We are asking for your help. These mandates and rules circumventing the lawmaking process are wrong and illegal. Plus, there is no danger with COVID. Hospitalizations and death numbers are inflated all over the place. I have a request for the COVID response team. Focus your time and aggressive strategy of extra protection of the immunocompromised, and let the rest of us live in peace, get out of our lives and get out of our jobs. I'm doing my best, trying to be nice, even though I see what's happening very clearly and I'm extremely upset. But you can't expect us to be nice for much longer if we get ignored. When little by little, the government is stealing our rights, things will get louder and more personal. A revolution is brewing around the world, and you will see it inaugurated here, government leaders from lawns. Take a stand to defend our rights to choose what is right for each one of us. It's time to stop with these overreaching government restrictions. Do not apply the OHA rule in our communities. Government does not and should never have jurisdiction over our bodies. Thank you.
Thank you, Danny. Ms. Jones?
Thank you for your public comment. Our next presenter is Elizabeth Cable, followed by Nicholas Anselmo. Elizabeth, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public comment.
Well, hello, good morning.
Your audio is not coming through, Cable.
Looks like you're muted.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
My apologies. Good morning. My name is Elizabeth Ann Cable. I was born here in Lane County on December 1st, 1966 at Sacred Heart Hospital. I am from a long line of Oregon generations. I have 4 generations buried in Brownsville, 2 generations here. My father's ashes were cast at Cape Creek last March, and I have birthed a son. So I'm in the midst of many generations of Oregonians. And although we are domiciled in Washington, D.C., I live here in Lane County. And I've been doing a lot of research over the past 24 hours, including reading the Declaration of Independence and starting to read the Oregon Constitution. It's really exciting that you commissioners have the seats that you have. And as you know, it's the closest level of government to the people. And that's just really exciting. And I'm happy to see your faces. And I'm happy to be here talking to you right now. And I see that you're all in the comfort of your own home. And I was thinking, well, where do the Lane County commissioners meet during a state of emergency? Why, it's in the comfort of their own home, it seems, on Zoom cameras. Does their home then become a place of public access since they're obviously treating it as such? Are you comfortable in your home office? It seems so. And I'm comfortable here. I brushed my teeth for this meeting, but that's about it. It says, and I quote from your website, an effective county commissioner can leave a legacy of good works and make an impact on people's lives. And I know that Kate Brown passed an executive order or executed an executive order 2024, and that it can be rescinded before June 30th, 2022. And I really hope that it does, because the state of emergency is getting too comfortable for all of us, I think. After March 31st, Lane County will decide whether to keep people in this twisted ritual of mask wearing, which goes completely against the true health of the people. Your seats, my commissioners, are in jeopardy. I will personally help defeat you, Joe Berney and Heather Buck, if you do not start acting on your own accord from a place that listens to the researchers of science. Government cannot force the people to abide by arbitrary medical treatments or devices, such as masks. And I hope that Pat Allen starts to listen and Joycelyn Warren starts to listen. You serve the people. If voting is to be trusted and the people of Lane County put you in the seats you're in, then the people can replace you. Studies indicate that COVID mRNA injections are causing harm. Bottom line.
Thank you, Ms. Cable. Ms. Jones?
Thank you for your public comment. Our next presenter is Nicholas Anselmo, followed by Liz Killam. Nicholas, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your presentation.
Good morning. I see you're all still cowards behind your screens. That's really unfortunate. I was hoping that you guys would not be cowards anymore, but I guess that's too much to expect. I got into an auto accident to find myself to be cancer-free. That was really interesting. I'm kind of disappointed it wasn't really worth the car accident to just find out that I'm actually healthy. Really interesting. Joe Berney or any other commissioner I didn't hear any comments on any of the permanent masking mandates that went through, regardless of witnessing his own granddaughter's abuse and developmental retardation due to chronic masking. That really says a lot to the courage of our county commissioners. My mother and my father both got COVID recently. My mom, 68, almost passed away. She refused to go to the hospital because she is afraid of the hospital and afraid of the doctors and everything that they've been doing. She is a healthcare worker. She's been a healthcare worker for all her life. And the thing that saved her life was her naturopath, who gave her all of the things that they say don't work on helping people with COVID. They gave her ivermectin, they gave her vitamin D, they gave her zinc, they gave her antibiotic Z-Pak. And literally the day that they gave her that, she returned to health, and she's been getting better ever since. She almost died. The only thing worse than non-essential space wasters are those that get paid to be useless space wasters. The fact that our government and OHA called people non-essential is the most disgusting thing. And none of you cowards stood up against calling people non-essential. That's the most evil thing I could ever think of, is calling people non-essential. What does that do to somebody's worth? What does that do to somebody's pride? It's absolutely unforgivable, and it's disgusting. And I didn't hear any one of you comment on any of those mandates. And you know the harm that they will do and are doing to our population and to people's psyche. It's disgusting, and it needs to stop. And none of you wasteless, useless waste spacers are doing anything about it. And I don't think you ever will, because you've proven yourselves to be cowards. And
you have 15 seconds.
And it needs to stop. It needs to go away. And we will fight for our liberty as our founding.
Thank you, Mr. Anselmo. Ms. Jones, thank you.
Thank you, Chair Farr. Our next speaker is Liz Killam, followed by Tressa Beaver. Liz, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your presentation.
Thank you. Good morning, Board of Commissioners. I am hoping in the near future that you will be back to having public hearings so that we can all be in the same place. I do agree with the former speakers, but with some more respect than the last fella, though I understand where he's coming from. I agree with them that they stated that the board needs to stop the mask mandates. Yesterday, of course, the state of Oregon stated they'd stop the mandate on March 31st. However, those who are actually paying attention would note that in order for the state of Oregon to do that, what they actually did was give themselves permanent power over the mask mandates, so they can reimpose them at any time they deem necessary. So that leaves you as the county commissioners, like some of the former speakers said, that you have power over us locally. You have the ability to say, we're not going to require those living in Lane County to live under these oppressive mask mandates. If someone feels that it's necessary to wear a mask when they're in public, if they're immunocompromised, or because of the state of fear that we've been in, and Steve Mokrahysky's emails to county employees has not been helping. He's been exacerbating the fear in many people. And Dr. Ludke, I know that you, as the board, listen to a lot of what Dr. Ludke has to say, and I'm sure he's a brilliant man, but he's just one voice, and he seems to have an awful lot of power over the decisions that are made here in Lane County, because the board institutes a lot of his restrictions over the county. So I would ask, please, that you ensure that these mandates are lifted and that we don't have to live under this anymore. It's getting ridiculous. We are getting tired of it. And it's time to listen to some other voices, please, commissioners, other than those of Dr.-elect.
Science.
Thank you, Ms. Bieber.
Thank-
Ms. Jones.
Thank you for your public comment. Our next speaker is Tressa Beaver, followed by Ann Nealand. Tressa, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public comment.
Hello. Thank you so much for hearing and listening to our public comments today. Can you hear me? Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Right.
Please start the time limit. Thank you.
You need to stop these permanent mandates from moving forward. It is unconstitutional. You are sitting in a seat as county commissioners to represent the public, to represent the people of Lane County. And over the last 2 years, I have not really seen you do that at all. Every single one of your jobs are at stake by you not listening to the people. We, as a community of people, spent days on the Oregon Health Authority's public comment, giving public comment. There was over 500 people there giving public comment. And if you are not listening, you are in for a big surprise as we, the people, stand up and literally take your positions. It's unacceptable. You need to stop these permanent mask mandates. You need to stop mandatory vaccinations. Get out of the schools, get out of your homes and start actually living your lives. As a business owner, I will not and refuse to live under this tyrannical rule. And you can find me all you want, but I will never pay. And I will encourage other people to never pay your $500 fines for not wearing a mask. I will never be muzzled. And if this is what you're gonna do, you're in for for some major challenges as your board seats come up. And we will hold you all accountable. You know that this is endangering our children's lives, our own personal lives. It is completely unhealthy and it's unacceptable for you to be pushing these permanent mask mandates.
You have 15 seconds.
I'm aware of that, how much time I have. And you all need to be held accountable for your actions. Stand up and support the people today.
Thank you, Ms. Beaver. Ms. Jones.
Sorry, couldn't get the unmute button. Thank you, Chair Farr. Our next speaker is Ann Nealand, followed by Ibra Taher. Ann, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public comment.
Good morning. I'm Ann Nealand, and I want to thank Commissioner Bozovich for his comments last week that called out Lane County's Dr. Jocelyn Warren's hyperbolic praise of the, quote, vaccines. Commissioner Bozovich correctly noted that the jab can only potentially help the person who got jabbed on an individual level. In response, Dr. Warren essentially admitted that there is no meaningful benefit from the jabs at a community level because the jabs cannot prevent an individual from getting or giving the virus. When Dr. Warren blatantly glosses over this distinction, it contributes to the misinformation and fear that makes Oregon and Eugene in particular cling to the divisive and misguided mandates and policies. I believe Dr. Warren, as an employee of the Lane County Public Health, is accountable to this board. and you should hold her accountable for her sloppy and erroneous language that is to blame for the continued misinformation in our community and state about the effectiveness of the injections and masks, which in turn fuels some residents to jab and mask their children who are in a very, very low risk of harm from COVID. Just yesterday, Governor Brown and the OHA issued a permanent rule that says the indoor mask will end on March 1st, if not sooner, and the mask for the schools will end on March 31st as well. Oregon didn't need a permanent rule to mandate masks for 6 more weeks, so the public is understandably skeptical and distrusting of this rule. And we should be suspicious because the permanent rule means OHA can turn the mask mandates on and off and on again. And the garbage explanation that the kids need to be masked until March 31st to give schools a chance to prepare. Prepare for what? Allowing the kids to breathe again? Throwing away the face diapers? This stinks of more manipulation and trickery, and this board should stand at the ready to hold the state to these dates, which are already too late, and uphold the end of the mask mandates for everyone, in particular the students. People are already distrusting of the tyrannical ways of Kate Brown. If she reverses course this time, with any luck, it will be a fatal blow to the Democratic hold on the governor's office and the Democratic legislators in the fall. And this is true also for Lane County. I am optimistic that with a modicum of common sense from Commissioner Bozovich in challenging the effectiveness of the jabs and masks, voters will demand a freedom-loving conservative commissioner in District 1 in the upcoming elections and will inspire voters in Districts 2 and 5 to vote for a conservative, common sense candidate for who supports the end of the mandate so we can break the tyrannical hold of the left-leaning.
You have 15 seconds.
And end the pandemic in Lane County. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Neeland. Ms. Jones.
Thank you, Chair Farr. Our next speaker is Ibra Taher. I apologize if I'm not pronouncing your name right, followed by Maura Dewey. Ibra, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public comment.
Hello, good morning. My name is Ibra Taher. I was born in Eugene, long-time Eugenian, Oregonian. Last week, or maybe 3 weeks ago, in my testimony, I said, we are really hesitant to testify or give a public comment because we don't feel that our voices are being heard. And sure enough, just after the public testimonies, the board went to their business as usual, as no one has testified against what they're doing. So again, what's the point of the public testimonies if the board doesn't want to listen to us? And I also asked a question, which is, in this controversial science, what was the justification from the Board of Commissioners to pick up only one side of the scientific narrative and impose it on the others? So when we talk about the scientific evidence and the government rule, we're talking about two things, an issue with two sides, and the other one is your responsibilities, your power. So when we ask about your power, we want to know what gives you that power on the people. What gives you that power to subjugate the people and treat them as a selfless subject? So how the government came down to this mentality that we need to tell people what to do in order to protect others. The scientific evidence, again, from the beginning of March 2020 was not settled. Actually, when the WHO and the CDC declared the emergency, they lacked the evidence. The only evidence was available on that time is contradictory to what they were saying. I'm going to mention 3 studies to prove my point here. In February 2020, the only 3 studies that were published on the COVID were contradictory to the government narrative about the mortality rate. The Imperial College of London, in their assessment, they said that the mortality rate is 0.66. This is the same time the WHO and the CDC were saying the mortality rate is 3.4%. And the other study that I would like to mention is by Mr. Fauci himself. He said that the COVID-19 is more akin to the seasonal flu. It was published in February, but the media didn't talk about it. And
You have 15 seconds.
Then later into March, Professor Ioannidis from Stanford, he concluded that the mortality rate is 0.1 to 0.2%.
Thank you, Mr. Tear. Ms. Jones.
Thank you, Chair Farr. Our next presenter is Maura Dewey, followed by Sharon Underwood. Maura, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public comment.
Good morning, Commissioners.
You may be on mute. Your audio is off.
Let me try again.
Can you hear me now?
Maura, are you? Yes, I'm going to restart your timer. One moment.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, my name is Maura Dewey and I live in Cottage Grove. I'm here today because I've listened to several recordings of your meetings where you've been advised by Dr. John Ludke and others about the course that you should follow in directing Lane County's handling of SARS-CoV-2. I believe you're making decisions based on erroneous information. Since you are the governing body for health policy in this county, you must do the research to find out independently what the metrics are on this virus, instead of blindly accepting information given by compromised health organizations who are incentivized to maximize the virus. You are the ones ultimately responsible for these decisions. Dr. Ludke has stated that, quote, clearly, the vaccines deliver stronger immunity than the natural immunity of persons who have recovered from the virus. This is blatantly incorrect. And exactly the opposite is true. Immunity acquired after having the virus is much stronger and longer lasting, which you would know if you read any of the widely available scientific studies talking about immunity. Hundreds of studies on masking show that masks are ineffective and moreover harmful. In addition, Dr. Fauci himself has recently admitted that cloth and surgical masks are ineffective. And yet you continue to condone universal masking and masking of children in schools with cloth and surgical masks, which are completely useless. And then there's the recent study from Johns Hopkins showing that lockdowns have not worked and instead have harmed millions of people. This is a study from Johns Hopkins, who has been widely promoting this pandemic. And now they're saying that lockdowns do not work. A great many government bodies are currently ending these restrictions. England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, Denmark, Norway, Sweden, even France has ended mandatory masking. The governors of Connecticut, New Jersey, and Delaware, many other states are lifting requirements, and many never even instituted them in the first place. You commissioners are remiss in your duty, and I will be out there campaigning against you in the upcoming election if you fail to write your course.
You have 15 seconds.
We all know this is not about health. It is about collecting monetary incentives for hospitals and schools and government bodies. Ask yourselves why these incentives are being given. Search your souls and then do the right thing.
Thank you, Ms. Dewey. Ms. Jones.
Thank you, Chair Farr. Our next speaker is Sharon Underwood, followed by Kitty S. Sharon, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public comment.
Hello, my name is Dr. Sharon Underwood. My family has been in Oregon since the 1800s, and I love my home state. I'm saddened to see how much of a tyranny has taken over this state and what it is doing to oppress our people. Now that the OHA has disregarded the unanimous testimony of the public that was against vaccine mandates, I'd like to know what you are going to do to protect your constituents. They're threatening to fine Oregonians $500 for not wearing a mask after their policies have already impoverished many of our people with higher gas prices, inflation, increasing housing prices, more taxes, and on top of that, insult to injury is to instill a fine for wearing a useless mask. Are you okay with this? Democrats have become the party of tyranny. Your policies are making hardworking Oregonians more poor. You push for taking and spending more income as if you think it belongs to government and not to the people who earned it. To add insult, there is this fine that's being added. If you are for this, you have no compassion for your constituents. If you support vaccine mandates and masks that are not only ineffective, but harmful, you are committing malfeasance to our people. The leftists have overplayed their hand in this state, and there will be consequences. The people are angry. Even though you have some constituents who agree with being controlled, most of us don't. And we will be coming after your seats. We are organized. We are also capable of getting the word out and making sure there will be people who will look after us and not oppress us. I'd also like to say that the Democrat Party is still the party of segregation and discrimination if you are in favor of vaccine passports. This is similar to back in the days where there were whites-only restaurants, and now it will be vaccine-only restaurants. Ask yourself if you are for this kind of thinking, because you will go down in history similar to the tyrants who had did things like this before. We also know that when it comes to immunity, the vaccines have negative immunity after 90 days. I implore you to look at—
You have 15 seconds.
In Israel, Denmark, Scotland, and the UK that show that over time, people with the vaccine are actually more likely to die of COVID. Look at the other side of science, not what your party tells you.
Thank you, Dr. Underwood. Ms. Jones, will you please introduce our 10th speaker?
Thank you, Chair Farr. Our next speaker is Kitty S., followed by Harry Sanger. Kitty, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public comment. Kitty, I do show yourself muted. Oh, there you go.
Okay, thank you. I don't use Zoom that often. Good morning. My name is Katrina, and I would like to give public comments. First, I would like to second what everybody has said today. And I would like to implore you to please use the authority that you have to not enforce this new rule that has come down on us. I do find it very interesting that OHA and Kate Brown decided to make their announcement yesterday, which is exactly the day before that the current illegal mandate was set to expire, which was set to expire today. And they put out this public statement that the new mandate is going to be lifted by March 31st, hopefully, if all conditions, whatever conditions those may be, will be met. So I implore you to please do not use the power that you have. Listen to the people that have spoken here. I'm so far number 10, and this is just a fraction of the people that oppose these rules. So please listen to us and pay attention to your constituents. Like was already been said, over 500 of us have sent countless emails to Oregon Health Authority. And what we say in those emails is to look at the data, look at the other side of the data. Masks have no effectiveness, zero cloth mask. If anything, as admitted by the CDC, N95s, if properly fitted, may reduce the spread of COVID-19. What are we doing? Masking ourselves. It's absolutely ridiculous. When I found out yesterday that OHA made this new rule, I was livid. These rules really affect me on a personal, emotional, mental, and spiritual level, and it has been for so long. I am a healthy individual. I got COVID a couple weeks ago. A bunch of my friends, all my coworkers got COVID. We all beat it. I'm unvaccinated. I had the least severe case. I don't even want to get into the vaccine issue. Masks are absolutely ridiculous. They do absolutely nothing. I work in a masked environment, yet we all got it. How are people still getting COVID if we're masked all the time? It makes zero sense. So please listen to us today and do what you can in your power to not enforce this rule and let the temporary mandate expire today as it should have been. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. S. Ms. Jones, before we proceed, do you have an approximate number of further participants, further comments?
I do see 4 additional hands raised.
Very good. Let's continue with a 4. Then we will I'll allow the next 4. Thank you.
Chair Farr,
Yes.
a few more hands raised at that point when you asked, so I have 6.
You allow the next 4 like this?
So I have now 7,
Ridiculous.
Chair Farr.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Then we'll continue until the hands lower. Ms. Jones.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Harry Sanger, followed by Steve Godot, or Godot. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. I apologize. Mr. Sanger, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public comment.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Chair Farr, I would like a point of order before the timer begins.
The timer is continuing, Mr. Sanger. Thank you.
I would like a point of order. If the new policy is to cut off our ability to speak when the clock strikes 0, can you please avoid verbal interruption and can you please follow Robert's Rules of Order? Thank you. The desires of the people are simple. Let us be. Let us earn wages and be secure in our private property. Let us participate in our community and develop bonds of friendship and trust. Let us provide resources for the downtrodden without allowing them to trot all over us. Stop outsourcing pollution and importing natural resources and let us bear the weight of responsible use within our own backyard. Your job is to help manage the ship, not to steer it off a cliff. Your public health officials are rapidly losing our trust by refusing to listen to the people and earnestly investigate the studies and science myself and others are presenting to you on a weekly basis. Several members of the public brought up the concept of hospitalized with COVID versus hospitalized from COVID months ago, yet you refuse to acknowledge this key distinction and incorporate it in your metrics. Only now that your lead agency masters are beginning to make this distinction, do you begin to include it in this discussion. This isn't leadership and it isn't representative of what the people want. Come on, we're not that smart, but we are open to hearing a diversity of viewpoints and analyzing the available data on our own. OHA held hearings on their proposed permanent masking rule. Hundreds of concerned Oregonians called in, including a significant number of Lane County residents. Do you know how many comments were in support of the permanent administrative rule? 0. Not a single comment was lodged in support. You're not listening to us. But over 100 people spoke against this proposal, providing scientific data to support their opposition. What did the OH do? They ignored the will of the people and are moving forward in violation of the public trust. They tell us it's only until March 31st, conveniently situated just after the plan to roll out a digital passport system, which I might add has no formal procurement documented through the state's competitive bidding process. I don't believe in this being a coincidence. California's come right out and said they will end the indoor mask mandate for the vaccinated. Oregon has coordinated their pandemic response with Washington and California. One must predict they will follow suit unless this blatant civil rights violation is successfully challenged in the court of law. You are complicit in this. You have ignored the other side of the story since the so-called emergency began. With the information available today, you're either willfully harming our society or you're not intelligent enough to see what your actions have brought upon the community. If you are sincere and effectively representing the people of Lane County, I challenge you to hold a town hall meeting in person, open to the public, without mask requirements, outdoors if need be, to make everyone comfortable. Ask us if we agree you are taking this response in the correct direction. Allow us to meet in person and see what people support and what numbers. Otherwise, I will continue to advise friends and neighbors that you are instituting tyranny through an illegitimate authority and that non-compliance is a legitimate response to illegitimate demands. There is no law that requires any free resident of Lane County to wear a mask, and we will not comply. Pat Farr, you need to stop that, and I will be filing a complaint for your abuse of the rules of order. I asked for a point of order that you not interrupt. Can you not listen to the people? Are you all that dense? Goodbye.
Thank you, Mr. Sanger. Ms. Jones.
Thank you, Chair Farr. As a quick note, please note we only take public testimony from people one time on one topic. So if you've already given public testimony, we will not be calling upon you again to give testimony again this morning. Our next speaker is Steve Godot, followed by Roxy Saskax. I really apologize for names if I'm mispronouncing them, and please feel free to correct me. Thank you. Steve, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public comment. Steve, I show you are self-muted.
To the timer, Ms. Jones.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can now.
Good morning. Thank you for your time and being present, unlike OHA that had, for the most part, were not present for 15 hours of testimony. OHA is not a fourth branch of government that can make law. At the January 20th hearing, over 300 Oregonians demanded an end to mandates and easily translate to 300,000 people. I'll read to you what I read to them then. Condemnation without investigation is a height of ignorance, Albert Einstein. This is your notice of liability. We, the people of Oregon, know what you're doing. Your agendas 21 and 30, your Great Reset, your Build Back Better globalist initiative, ID 2020, and your Event 201 fall 2019 predicted all of this, not to mention multiple coronavirus patents from years before. We know what you're up to with your Carrie Mullis's overcycled PCR pulse positives and the revolving doors between Big Pharma, the CDC, and the FDA. You guys have lost all credibility. As unelected officials without medical degrees attempting to adopt administrative rules to coerce and fine individuals for any sort of face covering or vaccines for that matter, all under emergency use authorization as a medical device and a medical procedure, respectively, for a disease with an over 99% survival rate. You cannot show us an isolated virus or connect it to disease, nor can you show conclusive proof that masks are effective. You have ignored all dissenting opinions, professional or otherwise, and all other opposing medical research and views. This is a fundamental breach of the basic tenet of law, audi alteram partem, to hear the other side. If you and the governor and other executive officials do not cease and desist, people will pursue justice to the fullest extent of the law. Dr. David Martin reminds us that the United States embraces the Nuremberg Code under 21 Code of Federal Regulations, sections 50.23 and 24, that states it is illegal to coerce anyone to participate in these continued medical experiments of vaccines, masks, and PCR tests, and under 18 U.S. Codes 2331 and subsection 802, coercion is defined as domestic terrorism. This is a felony punishable by up to 99 years in prison and up to $100 million in fines for institutions. By continuing to risk facing charges for crimes against humanity, treason, and sedition, as is currently being pursued by Dr. Reiner Fulmish of the Coronavirus Investigative Committee, and just recently separately filed by the People of Truth in the International Criminal Court at the Hague Tribunal. And finally, $29 billion in federal bribes dividing among each Oregonian is close to $7 grand. Between 2020 and 2021, all-cause mortality in the U.S. has risen 40%. The only change is the vax. At best, OHA are criminally negligent, but the federal funding proves they're criminally complicit. Lane County Health can lead the way for Oregon out of this pandemic, hold a second opinion symposium similar to Senator Ron Johnson's in the Senate on the 24th of January. Thank you very much for your time. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you for.
Mr. Godu, Ms. Jones.
Sorry, Commissioner Farr. Our next speaker is Roxy, followed by MS. Roxy, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public comment. Roxy, I do show that you are self-muted. There you go.
Oh, is it working now?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Happy to speak to the county criminals on this morning. I think it's really pathetic and it's a joke that I have to speak to you through a screen. Only criminals hide behind a lens and won't actually show their face and allow people to speak to them about things that are going on, things that are affecting the public, things that are hurting the public, but that's another story. So this winter I did a lot of traveling. I went to Europe, I went to the East Coast, and honestly, like it's just the West Coast that's still like dealing with all this like nonsense. Like, it's really a shame because everywhere else in the world, they've already ended mandates. They've already like gone back to whatever normal is. And here we're still being jerked around with pointless mandates, pointless vaccines and everything else. And I just want to know like when this is going to end. And if not, what does it take to have you guys taken out of office? Do I have to like go after your bonds? Do I have to go to the Secretary of State? Do I have to get that involved? Because if you guys aren't going to do what we're asking you to do, then obviously other steps have to be taken. And it seems that that's the only right thing to do anymore because we can't count on you guys to do the right thing because you guys just keep lying, you keep extending dates, you keep saying one thing, but then you never actually do the one thing you said you would do. So it's like, here we are paying you and having you guys provide for the county and everything else, but you're not doing your job, the one thing that you're supposed to be doing. So it's unfortunate that you can't give me answers right now, but just know that there's a lot of people that are willing to do the right thing, whether it means to have all of you removed from office, whether it means finding where you guys live and, I don't know, possibly doing something else. But just so you know, there's a lot of people involved in this, and we're not going to back down. And I need you to do the right thing. And where's that guy? And to Joe Bernie, it seems that he's a proponent for permanent masking. And it seems that there have been people witnessing that he is abusing his daughters or granddaughters, it looks like, and that is due to their developmental retardation. And it's a shame that people with this kind of power are abusing their own family and everything else. And it's really sad that somebody like that is having the authority that they do.
You have 15
And, just know your time's coming, and have a great day.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank you.
Ms. Jones.
Thank you, Chair Farr. Our next presenter is MS, followed by Jim Schaefer. MS, I unmute your microphone and you may begin your public comment. MS, I do show you are self-muted.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. First off, I just want to say it is incredibly powerful to hear from everyone here. To those of you who are elected, are you listening? Are you listening to the people that are there to be represented by you? I mean, it is absolutely shameful to hear the things that the concerns that people are bringing forward. Some of the things that I want to talk about today are the fact that we have instituted policies on children that are known to be harmful to children. The British Medical Journal and the National Institute of Health in 2015 both released studies showing the harms caused by cloth masking, the increase in risk of respiratory infections. Next, I wanted to talk about the permanent mask mandate. Clearly, it says here that a face covering needs to fit snugly above the nose and below the mouth and on the sides of the face. Snugly implies pressure. Now, I say that for a reason because the Oregon Revised Statute 339.288 lists it is an unlawful, according to 1B, mechanical restraint, and then later on 1G, any restraint that places or creates a risk of placing pressure on a student's mouth unless a restraint is necessary for the purpose of extracting a body part from a bite. These masks are not used to extract body parts from bites. It is clearly an unlawful mechanical restraint. Furthermore, in 1H, it says that any restraint that is unlawful impedes or creates any risk of impeding breathing. I don't know how any of you could sit there and argue that placing any filtration device over a student's face does not increase the risk of impeding breath. There's no logical explanation that you can make. Furthermore, as a healthcare worker who was forced out of his position due to vaccine mandates, I'd like to bring into the conversation Oregon Revised Statute 431.180, which makes it an unlawful act for OHA to interfere with an individual's selection of healthcare provider, treatment, or religious practice to treat their own health. These acts are clearly unlawful. Are you listening to the people that elected you to represent them? Because you are allowing unlawful behavior to continue. You should be ashamed of yourselves. This is disgusting. I'm done, and I'm done with all of you.
Thank you, MS. Ms. Jones.
Thank you for your public comment. Our last speaker is Jim Schaefer. Jim, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public comment. Thank you. Jim, I do show you are self-muted.
Yes, I'm Jim Schaefer. And you've heard from people bringing science and bringing their other views into this. And I'm going to bring you to a thought process maybe that you'll give some credence to because I've personally experienced this. The first thing I have to share with you is there's a concept that goes with humanity that we have this thing about God that well, he's not involved in the affairs of earth, and he sees us not. And the rest of this is for me to read to you here. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of the people, who suppress the truth and unrighteousness. Because what can be known of God is plain to them, because God has made it plain to them. For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes, his eternal power, his divine nature have been clearly seen, because they understood through what has been made. So people are without excuse. For although they knew God, they did not glorify him as God or give him thanks, but they became fertile in their thoughts, and senseless hearts were darkened. Although they claimed to be wise, they became fools. And I'm against any further mandates by this government in Oregon. And I'm already involved. I will become more involved in helping unseat, bring you folks into an account. To purposely not listen to the people is the wrong behavior. Wrong, totally wrong. And at that point, I am done, and may you have a God-conscious wake-up. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Schaefer. And Ms. Jones, this concludes public testimony for the day. At this point, we'll move along to item 4 on our agenda, which is the Commissioner's response to public comments and/or other issues or remonstrances. I will look to the queue for hand raises for item 4. I see no hands raised. Pardon me, Commissioner Burney.
Thank you, Chair. First, I would like to say that it's kind of disappointing that that the anger that is palpable in some of the public comments sometimes can preclude people listening. I, for one, have tried to listen. I've tried to ignore absolutely inappropriate attacks that are based in nothing but, I think, politically motivated, honestly. And I was very sorry to hear so much partisanship. But having said that, and it makes it more difficult for me to listen, but having said that, I actually am going to be asking some questions because science is evolving. Voices are being heard. We're not OHA. Mr. Mokrahysky, could you correct me? But many people talked about Lane County not enforcing OHA and state and federal mandates. My understanding is Lane County does not enforce those. Is that correct or not?
That's correct. Those are state rules that are in place that the county has no authority or jurisdiction to enforce, and we have not been enforcing.
Thank you very much. So I hope that clarifies that aspect. I also believe Lane County hasn't done anything other than make vaccines available to various community groups and educate. But I do think it's time, and I will be asking questions, because it looks like data is now allowing us to be a little more precise. And it does look like, and I'll ask the doctors after the next thing, but it does look like 75% of those that go into hospitals or succumb to COVID are 65 years and older. It does look like the vast majority are unvaccinated, even though vaccinations don't now stop from getting COVID nor transmitting it as it relates to impact on the healthcare system and hospitals. It's obvious that they do make a difference. And my understanding is up to 80% of the people that go into hospitals or succumb are obese. So as we start learning more and becoming more precise, and my understanding also is that over 99% of young people meaning elementary school, middle school, high school age, do not succumb do not die from the virus. So I think this has implications on our position, but I think it's really also important to educate about what the county does and doesn't do. I, for example, when I was chair, was negotiating and trying to open up, and I think Commissioner Bozich will remember this, open up gyms and venues for entertainment if masks were worn at that time based upon what we knew. So please know that you are being listened to. We're trying to do what's right, and that's what we're trying to do. And thank you, Chair. I think the other thing to remember is that we have so much more that unites us than that divides us. That isn't it interesting during the silly season of elections that's when things kind of bubble to this point. And I hope that moderation and love unto others as we wish them to love us becomes the rule by which not only the public makes presentations, but by which this board acts. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Burney. I'm looking for further hands in the queue, and I see none. Then I'll take a turn in the queue very briefly. I'm not going to respond directly to the threats and/or personal attacks that took place in the testimony today, but we will be examining that. And for next week's or for the next meeting, we'll have a discussion regarding how the chair will respond to what sometimes are personal attacks and sometimes seem to be veiled threats. And I'll cover that more in detail once we look at that a little bit more in detail and once the testimony has been examined further. The thing I would like to talk about ever so briefly today, Commissioners, is by now you've heard about the sudden passing of Steve Joel on Friday. Steve worked the last 7 years of his working life as the maintenance person for Homes for Good, prior called HACSA. Steve passed suddenly. Many of us knew him he I've known Steve since we were both young men. I've known Steve for greater than 30 years. It leaves a great hole in both our lives and our presentation of service. Steve was a remarkable father, grandfather, public servant, and not only do I miss him, but everybody who's been associated with him. We'll have more to talk about Steve at some point in the future, but Steve Joel, and to your family, we will miss you. Thank you. We'll move along then. At the sound of my gavel, I will be recessing the Board of County Commissioners meeting, and we will reconvene as the joint meeting of the Board of Health and the Board of County Commissioners. Welcome to the Board of Health, Board of County Commissioners joint meeting. Today on our agenda for the Board of Health, we have adjustments to the agenda. Mr. Mokrahaisi, are there any adjustments to the agenda?
No.
Thank you. To the board, I see none. Mr. Mokrahaisi, any emergency business?
No.
I see none. Then we will move along to item 3, which is a discussion of COVID and COVID-19 response and recovery. Mr. Mokrahaisi, you have a panel with us today, which includes Mr. Adam. Okay. Commander and Dr. Justin.
Things from Lane County, like a Lane County ad or something.
Yes.
Welcome again.
One has a.
Let him know I had to jump on for Eve for the board. So I will.
Like we have somebody
I might take a few minutes.
Thank you. If you could mute your mic, Mr. Mokrahaisi, I'll turn it over to you in the panel.
Thank you, Chair. And this is our opportunity. Today we have Mr. Steve Adams, our incident commander for COVID-19 response in Lane County, and Dr. Jocelyn Warren, our public health manager, who are here to provide you, as we always do, a regular factual update with information on disease in our community and how things are trending. And as we found out, some upcoming changes at the state level related to certain guidance from OHA. So we'll provide that presentation and then answer your questions. Steve?
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mokrahaisi. Chair Farr, commissioners, good morning. Let's see. Let me just pull up my PowerPoint here. Okay. Chair Farr, this morning we are reporting an additional 313 cases within the last 24 hours. That brings us to 53,233 reported cases to date in the pandemic. We are showing a net reduction of 181 individuals that are within their infectious period. That is now down to 1,566. Over the last 24-hour period, we are showing 82 individuals, Wayne County residents in hospital, 11 of whom are in ICU beds. And that's a very significant change, down 33 from yesterday morning's number, mostly related to discharging processing within the state opera database. We are showing an additional 4 deaths reported in the last 24-hour period, bringing us to 423. So we are showing on a 7-day moving average a reduction down to 688.8 cases per 100,000 of population. So the net reduction here from this time last week is notable and is beginning to show up in our epi curve. So, over the last week, since I had an opportunity to brief this board last Tuesday, we've added 2,607 new cases. So that is a decline in the rate of new reports. Our daily infectious count, those individuals who are within their infectious period, is down by about 1/3. In a week's time over what we were reporting last week. Hospitals are slightly down, I would characterize, been kind of in a steady state for the past week, so we are clearly at the peak. And I would say we're continuing to hold our own, and our hospitals are able to continue to provide elective procedures to patients who are coming in. Over the last week, we have reported 13 deaths associated with infections of COVID-19. Now, we understand, and we have seen this in previous inflection points in the past, last fall, during the Delta surge this past fall, and then during the current Omicron, that cases will peak first, hospitalization second, and deaths third. And we are exhibiting that. The epi curve shows us that we're on the other side of that peak and trending downward. That is most welcome news. Just moving very quickly to a vaccination perspective, we continue to add additional individuals into vaccinated status. We were, just for reference, we were really delighted to meet the 70% of our entire population having received at least one vaccination in their series to begin the COVID-19 vaccination process by the end of 2021, by December 31. So we hit 70%. By the end of January, we had added another 1.5%, and we were reporting 71.5% at the end of January. A week later, we're able to report that we've increased another 0.25% of our total population. So as of now, we're reporting 71.75% of our entire population has received at least one vaccine. So that indicates that individuals continue to step forward for vaccination, and we continue to provide vaccination opportunities for those individuals who seek vaccination, no matter their age or no matter their location. We have boosted just over 41% of our adult population as of yesterday's refresh data in the county. So there's some additional work to go there. And our vaccination rates amongst our youth, I think, are notable. So for our 12 to 17-year-olds, our middle and high schoolers, we're reporting 71% have received at least one vaccination. And that is really positive news. Our 5 to 11-year-olds are reporting 36.6% have received at least one vaccine as of now, and we continue to see progress there. So slow incremental increases in that overall number, and that translates, of course, into really kind of work on the ground. So this was the slide that I presented last week. Last Tuesday, this was last Monday's latest data. And then carrying this forward, these are yesterday's updated data. The percentage change here is 0.1% here in a zip code, maybe 0.2% there. But that is really the business of our efforts. We continue to, across all providers, do about 1,000 shots a day here in Wayne County. So it is just slow and incremental work to offer those boosts and offer those first and second doses for individuals who continue to come forward. So that is the updates with respect to our vaccination process. So of course, I do want to speak to news yesterday, late breaking. We had some inkling in advance, but very little. We heard, of course, from OHA and the Oregon Department of Education that they would, in fact, be adjusting their statewide masking rules. So we know that no sooner than March 31, but no later than is the language that we've been advised. The school masking rules that are currently at a statewide requirement level will in fact cease. And at that point, it then becomes the question of each individual school district. So each district board will then be setting their own policies with respect to masking across the state of Oregon, and each local public health authority will have a responsibility to provide advice to each school district to the extent that they wish to hear it in setting their own mask policies. And then, of course, the other rule, the other announcement yesterday was that the statewide indoor masking mandate would expire no later than March 31, and likely sooner based on conditions on the ground. And that was noted to be hospitalizations and, essentially case rates, so disease burden statewide. So we heard some inklings through our colleagues that something was happening at the state level. We, of course, for months now have worked very closely with our school districts, the Lane Education Support District. We got calls yesterday that they were hearing some word was afoot as well, and so we were on the phone and trading notes and discussing what we were hearing. So we're continuing to process those announcements as well. And we have a bit of work ahead of us from a response perspective to think about the county's role as we move forward. Chair Farr, that is my update for this morning.
I said, excellent. I'll say that again. Dr. Warren, good to see you. Is that the completion of the staff report then? Right on.
It is, Chair Farr. We're happy to answer questions.
We may have a question or two. I'm looking to the queue right now for raised hands. Yet. Then I will, until a hand raises, I have a quick question, and it's a question that I ask very often. I have an opportunity, as we all do, to speak to people in venues other than across the screen. You know, we see people in Albertsons or whatever store we happen to be in. We see people on the street, and people do have questions for us since we are the Board of Commissioners. And Commissioner Trigger, I'll finish this quickly and get to you. The question that I ask is, am I given the right information regarding masks and personal hygiene? I tell people that masks are a precaution, not 100% effective. I tell people that in conjunction with personal hygiene, such as washing hands and avoiding close contact, it becomes more effective. And as we continue, that making certain that if you're in large groups inside, that you remain as distant as you can, and once again avoid contact and wash your hands. Am I still saying the right thing there? Can you reinforce that for me? And is there anything else I should be saying?
I'm happy to take a start at that, Chair Farr, and Steve can jump in too. Yes, I think that is true, that that continues to be our best guidance. We, of course, have continued to learn a lot about masking and what the most effective masks are. And as that science evolves, we certainly adopt that as well. I think the one other piece that I hope that we can also spend some more sort of effort on too is ventilation. As aerosol science progresses around the COVID disease specifically, I think we know that masks are sort of like the last line of defense, right? And this layered defense, things like ventilation and distance as you manage are also critically important. Of course, the best defense continues to be vaccination, but in combination, those things are very effective.
Thank you, Dr. Warren. That's for reinforcing what I've been stating, and I'll continue to state that. And I'm going to say this out loud right now. Every one of us, us in this room, us outside of the room watching, every one of us has people and sources that we trust. I trust the information that is provided to us by the Health Department of Lane County. I believe you look at the most accurate sources, the most up-to-date sources, and I trust the words that we receive from you, and I will continue to trust that. Vice Chair Trieger, pardon my queue jumping. I don't think I did because your hand wasn't raised yet, so I'll move to Vice Chair Trieger and then down the queue.
Thank you so much, Chair. Good morning, everyone. And no, my hand wasn't up right away. Appreciate your comments, echo them, including and particularly my trust in our professionals, many people, even though the public may only see a few faces on the screen. Our public health division is a deep and wide base of knowledge, and I know everyone in our public health division is also in regular contact with other counties around Oregon and other states around the country, and so I appreciate all that work. And so, speaking of that, I wanted to ask. My understanding is that as tragic as the thousands of lives that have been lost and the many more thousands of people who have been sickened and whose lives have been negatively affected by this virus, overall, Oregon is doing the best, if not one of the best states in terms of our rates of infection and disease severity. And so I just wondered if off the top of your head, one of you could share where we are sort of in the pack of 50, and also how that aligns with the measures, the protective measures that we've put in place, both in policy and in practice in the state of Oregon and here in Lane County.
Vice Chair Trieger, indeed, I think that it is notable that Oregon has performed relatively well compared to other states. And I think it's even more remarkable to recognize that going into the pandemic, Oregon was 50 out of 50 states with respect to hospital beds per capita. So we had the lowest number of hospital beds of any of the 50 states. And I know, I think this is an important point for people to take in mind, that, in comparing some of the measures that Oregon took along the 2+ years now that we've been at this, vis-a-vis other states, in large measure, it's because of the lack of hospital beds that we had going into this. And that's not something that one can quickly spin up and be able to provide in a quality fashion. So that is a notable aspect, but we're essentially in the top 10, top 3 in a couple of instances with respect to the other states in terms of we're very high in vaccination rate of our total population. We're high with respect to performance for deaths as well here in Oregon. And I think different statistics would place us perhaps at different precise locations within the ranking of 50. But for the measures that matter most, I think Oregon has performed extremely well. Every week, Dr. Lutke has addressed and essentially convened our provider community here in Oregon, or in Lane County, our practices, our hospital practitioners, and provided a weekly briefing on what we know about case trends, what's happening, the latest science, what is coming out in the peer-reviewed literature, and then creating kind of a community of practice, right, in terms of thinking about how to treat disease once it's been diagnosed. So that weekly process has continued. I think that one of the really interesting features of that is that periodically Dr. Pat will use Lane County and 2 other comparator counties. And we have done that. Marion County to our north, which has a similar population, and then the county that encompasses Spokane, Washington as well, a little smaller, but similar kind of other kind of population dynamics that are similar. So we have kind of been thinking about that at a smaller scale of analysis as well. Nonetheless, the policy objectives all along have been to ensure that anyone seeking hospital care for any cause, particularly emergency acute care, a heart attack or a trauma, has access to an emergency room bed, and that has really guided our response, not only specifically here locally. And this is the piece that Dr. Warren and myself and Dr. Ludke and others have really focused on as we have thought about what we need to be doing on a day in, day out basis to respond to whatever the latest case numbers are, whatever the trajectory is of regulation or new state mandates coming at us.
Great. Thank you so much for that. I know we've talked a lot about lessons learned in the pandemic, particularly sort of more at the individual population level of how it's affecting, certain demographics or communities. But it's also, right, who talked about hospital capacity with the regularity that people do now, and that's right, a systems failure that the pandemic has only really elevated importance. So I look forward to the time when we have more time to talk about, this notion of crisis care standards and hospital capacity and our healthcare region here in Lane County, how the hospitals that we have in Lane County actually are part of a broader multi-county region. All these questions about capacity for caring for our communities, no matter what's happening. I'm also wanting to just flag for folks that don't know, in this short session of the legislature, there's a potential for a bill that would put some money aside for evaluation of the response of the public health response to COVID, and to help inform us, not as much to critique, although maybe there will be some of that, but to inform moving forward for other inevitable, right, natural disasters and other conditions where we have to be able to respond quickly to serve the public health needs of our communities. So thank you, as always, for your work and for answering that question. And finally, I just really want to reiterate what Commissioner Chair Farr mentioned about, we have many other opportunities and places and ways that we get feedback and input and comment and questions from our constituents. And I want to assure people who sign up to give public comment, because I've done that myself many, 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 many times over many decades in this community, provided testimony to public bodies, that I absolutely am listening and taking in what you say and considering it and weighing it. And, we have many issues that we address on this board, and we get all kinds of comment, and we don't always agree with it, but that doesn't mean that we're not listening. And I very much appreciate everyone's time this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Next in the queue is Commissioner Buck, and Commissioner Burney, did you lower your hand intentionally, or was that an accidental lowering of?
I lowered it intentionally, and I will raise it again. I just know that I've already spoken, and I want to be Commissioner Buck, if that's okay.
Thank you, Chair, Commissioner Burney. And next in the queue, we have Commissioner Buck, and I will remind the public watching that Commissioner Bozievich is with us, even though not video. Commissioner Bozievich is with us audio. Commissioner Buck, followed by Commissioner Burney.
Thank you, Chair. This might be a question that we don't know the answer to quite yet, because the announcement from the governor's office came just yesterday. But if we don't know it now, I'd really like to maybe learn in our follow-up meeting what this will mean for our schools. If the children won't need to have masks anymore, will they still have to have all the other distancing requirements, or are those going to change in this coming month? I'm sure the school board is trying to work through those things, but if you've heard anything, that would be really important to me, as I have a little one that's in school, and so many others do as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Please, Mr. Adams.
Chair Farr and Commissioner Buck, indeed, the school level guidance has been changing pretty rapidly, really kind of beginning over the holiday period and into the latest news that we heard yesterday. So all of the school operations are guided by Ready Schools, Safe Learners, RSSL, and that is the framework in which the Oregon Department of Education and the Oregon Health Authority have provided specific operational details to schools. The vast majority of RSSL are best standards, best practices, but there are a core of requirements. aside from Ready School Safe orders, has been the masking requirement inside of schools. That then comes away on March 31. Other key aspects of the RSSL are the distancing piece has not really been in the school guidance for some time now. In fact, because schools have been considered to be essentially fully masked and that the protective wearing measures like ventilation and other measures were in place, the individual school kids could be much closer together than the general population and not considered to be close contacts, as would be the case with the general population. Now, one of the major changes that has come online within the last few weeks is a test to stay program that would enable a child, if exposed inside of a school environment, so bell to bell, on a school bus, at lunch, and the school is saying that masking is in place, that child need not go out of, essentially quarantine due to exposure. The child could test, and if the child tests negative, that child could stay for the first few days and then test again. We started this process when the quarantine length was longer, and as it has shrunk, it continues to be in place. With the mask mandate, what we understood yesterday, some of the nuance is that if a school district decides to take the mask requirement down for the schools within their district, then they will no longer be in a test to stay posture at that point. That any exposed child in an unmasked environment would in fact have to essentially work with the isolation and or the quarantine guidance specifically, right? So there's a number of nuanced rules that will change. Our schools are, we have worked closely with Lane ESD, and on a weekly basis, we meet with the school district superintendents and many of their nursing staff to really kind of go through these rules. We have daily contact from individual schools asking us how to think through particular issues, and we provide that kind of infection control assistance to them on a case-by-case basis. I suspect that because of the virtue of this relationship that we have built over many months now, I think we will work through this. But it's very clear, it's up to each individual school district to make their own decision about what their masking policies will be. And of course, as this goes down, they will be essentially conferring with Wayne County Public Health for advice on what measures they might want to put in place.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Thank you, Commissioner Buck. Commissioner Burney.
Thank you, Chair. I want to start by agreeing with the Chair. I trust our public health people also. I get input from McKinsey Willamette, Peace Health, Oregon Medical Group, friends, neighbors, talking to folks at the store, et cetera, et cetera. But I do trust your advice. So my questions are going to relate to, but I'm also aware, and less aware with public health, but with other units of government, that there is kind of an institutional think, if you would. And so I'm going to ask some questions that relate to that. But first, just to get a few things straight. Lane County, as it relates to COVID protocols, doesn't have any authority over any of the school districts. Is that correct?
Chair Farr, Commissioner Burney, that is correct.
My understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is that we are we never were, but the state, the federal government, there are no more lockdowns currently in place. Am I wrong about that?
Chair Farr, Commissioner Burney, you are not.
Okay, so we're out of that. And that's on the basis of accumulating data and pivoting as necessary based upon learning about this damn virus, correct?
Chair Farr, Commissioner Burney, that and facts on the ground.
Well, Chair Farr, it looks like every question I ask, your name will be elicited. I apologize for that. So just I try to take this line of thinking. Do we not now, and I know that this is not Lane County public policy. In fact, as Mr. Mokrahisi indicated, we don't even enforce right? We were asked by several of the people providing public testimony to please stop enforcing. We've never been enforcing, nor do we have the capacity to enforce. So at this point, don't we have a little bit more knowledge about who should and who doesn't need to be protected? Not us as a county, but just now I'm going to general questions. For example, I'm 75 years old. I weigh an extra 200 pounds and I have diabetes and I'm not vaccinated. Things probably don't look too good for me. Is that correct?
Chair Farr, Commissioner Burney, I think we would advise that individual to certainly seek vaccination if that were the case.
Okay. So I mentioned some statistics earlier. I'm ready for you to tell me I'm wrong or right. My understanding is something like 3/4 of all the deaths and hospitalizations from COVID are people 65 and older.
Chair Farr, Commissioner Burney, I can confirm that in a larger proportion of our older population has in fact showing up in death and hospitalization data. I don't know the specific or the particular percentage.
Well, Mr. Adams, I thought you were, I'm just kidding you. I was going to say, I thought you're paid to know this stuff. No, I'm just being silly. And my understanding is that the vast majority, not in Lane County, I was really surprised to learn that, but generally speaking, of people that are either in hospital requiring care or succumbing to this virus are unvaccinated. Is that correct?
Chair Farr, Commissioner Burney, indeed. So within our hospitalization and our mortality data, we see overrepresentation of unvaccinated individuals.
And overrepresentation of obese individuals also as a health condition, correct?
Chair Farr, for Commissioner Burney, for the cases for which we have had the ability to dive deeply into and understand the comorbidities, we have seen that trend, yes.
So what this is saying to me, and I'm not being critical, I'm just, what this is saying to me, and honestly, I don't like listening to angry and uninformed kinds of statements, but at what point, just given those things, do you think, it's not in our hands, but with state level, we focus on helping the vulnerable stay safe and let the rest of the population go back to normal life from a health perspective? Given what we know, and given that children aren't transmitting the disease to the point where they're becoming hospitalized or dying to a very large degree. When does that happen, do you think?
Chair Farr, Commissioner Burney, when does it happen? I think that is a process that is well underway. I can't speculate as to what OHA is thinking and what their timeline is. I can say that here in Wayne County Public Health, we have been as focused on trying to educate people about the measures they can take to keep themselves safe, as we have been working to inform the broader population about disease dynamics within our county. We think that this is an ongoing process. At some point, all kind of public sector mandates do fall away, and then it becomes a point of what each of us does to keep ourselves and our families safe.
And my understanding, forgive me, Chair, and my understanding is at this point, businesses can choose, correct, what their own vax policies are or their policies relating to their customers. For example, my understanding is some airlines are making the choice not to allow people on the airlines without vaccination, and people don't have to fly those airlines. Other businesses are saying, we don't care, and at some point, probably in the near future, I'm assuming we're moving in that direction. And the last thing I would say is, it is, there is a cost benefit to the learning skills and the social skills of our youngest to be masked, and so they can't see, right, people saying words or reading to them or getting that cognitive support. And I know that's a concern for all of you and all of us. I'm simply saying I think we're reaching a point where the metrics are moving us more and more back to something like normal. Thank you very much, and thank you, Chair, for allowing me to talk.
All good questions, all good comments, Commissioner. Thank you very much. And Mr. Adams, thank you very much for your comment. Dr. Warren, seems that you have nothing to say. Okay, good. Then I see nobody else in the queue. I'm just going to make one last comment, Mr. Mokarais, before we move along back to our regular meeting. And that is, I've been hearing a little bit about the paper that's been attributed to Johns Hopkins University. I heard about it quite a bit yesterday, heard about it a little bit today. And I'm going to read a quote that was published, as far as I can see, at 5:23 p.m. Eastern time yesterday. So this is a recent quote on that paper. The paper was written by Steve Hanke, or Hanke, H-A-N-K-E. Here's the quote on the paper. The paper is yet to undergo peer review and has not been shared or promoted by Johns Hopkins University, with the author noting in the document that views expressed in each working paper are those of the authors and not necessarily those of the institutions that the authors are affiliated with. But it has nevertheless been widely hailed and promoted by lockdown skeptics as evidence that the policy has been a failure, with many inaccurately attributing the paper to Johns Hopkins University, even as it was neither commissioned nor endorsed by the university. That's from a statement yesterday and that was in Newsweek, attributed to Newsweek magazine. So that's that was 12 hours ago, 14 hours ago that was stated. So things may have changed since then, but that is the most recent that I've heard regarding the touted Johns Hopkins paper. Mr. Adams, Dr. Warren, Mr. Mokarais, anything else for the order of the Board of Health agenda? I see nothing. Then at the sound of my gavel, we will adjourn the joint meeting of the County Commission and the Board of Health and reconvene the meeting of the Board of County Commissioners. Thank you all for attending. And welcome back to the Board of County Commissioners. Commissioners, we are dreadfully behind on the allocated time, which is never accurate, but we are somewhat behind on it. I'm not going to rush things. We have plenty on our agenda this morning. I believe we can fill it. We have before us item 7, which is our consent calendar. Do I have a motion?
Chair, I'll move that we move passage of the consent calendar for February 8th, 2022.
Second.
Moved by Vice Chair Trieger, seconded by Commissioner Burney. I will ask for discussion to the motion, and seeing none, we'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I heard Commissioner Bozievich that the motion passes unanimously 5-0. Moving directly along, we'll move along to item 8 on our consent calendar, which is the Health and Human Services. We have before us order 22-02-08-06 in the matter of approving 3 contracts and 5 amendments, delegating authority to the county administrator to sign the approved actions. Today, Mr. Mokarais, on your panel, I believe you have Ms. Eve Gray, Director of Health and Human Services. Mr. Mokarais.
Thank you, Chair. And I believe we have Kachina Inman with us to handle this item as Ms. Gray is in budget meetings, department budget meetings. Kachina, are you there?
Yes, I sure am.
Okay.
Good morning, commissioners. Thank you for your time.
Good morning.
I'll review our 3 contracts and amendments quickly. We have 3 contracts. The first is with Willamette Family. This is a sole source. This is funding coming down through the state and pass-through funding for residential services for alcohol and drug treatment. The next contract is an intergovernmental agreement with the city of Eugene for safe sleep sites, supporting infrastructure and operation support. The third contract is with the Oregon Health Authority, and this is promotion and prevention funds, revenue to support our public health prevention programs. And then we have 5 amendments. The first amendment is with Dr. Bovey, who is serving as our current medical director as we hire a full-time medical director at our Lane County treatment program. And then we have Genoa Psychiatry, which is telepsychiatry support. Again, we're having a very challenging time recruiting psychiatrists, and this is providing essential support for our clients at Behavioral Health. And then the third is Lane Community Health Council, and this is revenue to support our public health prevention programs. The fourth is Northwest Natural Gas. This is also revenue for our low-income gas assistance. And then lastly, we have funding through Trillium Community Health Plan, and this is revenue for Lane Care. one of our programs in behavioral health. And that is all I have for you. If there's any questions, please let me know and I will do my best to answer.
Thank you, Ms. Inman. Then I will open the queue for questions, and I may have a statement after the questions, but I see no one in the queue. Regarding the last contract you mentioned with one of our CCOs, that is a contract where we're receiving from the CCO, not paying to the CCO. Is that correct?
This is revenue, yes.
Revenue. Thank you very much. I have no statement to make at this point regarding that. We have board before us, no further discussion. I have order 22-02-08-06. Do I have a motion? Oh, I'm sorry. We're going to move back one step, and I do see a hand raised in the queue. I apologize.
No, you're good. I'll make the motion and then speak to it.
Then speak to the thank you, Commissioner Bernie. Go ahead.
I move approval of order 22-02-08-06.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Bernie, seconded by Commissioner Buck. Discussion to the motion. Commissioner Bernie.
Thank you very much. This isn't directly to the motion, but Ms. Inman, I don't know who else to ask. Did I read correctly now that, is it Pacific Source or Trillium, excuse me, Trillium is going to actually be partnering with Cahoots and providing them resources? And is this the kind of partnership that positively impacts our communities? And I know it's not directly the motion, I apologize. But is that correct?
That's a great question. And I am not sure if that's correct, but I'm more than happy to look into that for you. But of course, we support any partnerships for supporting critical services like Whitebird in our community and Cahoots.
I apologize, Chair. It is correct, by the way.
Okay, thank you.
No apology, Commissioner Bernie. I will mention that both of our CCOs, both Cahoots, both Trillium and Pacific Source is supporting Cahoots. And thank you to both of the CCOs for that. Further discussion to the motion. I see none, then I will call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
I heard Commissioner Bozovich's voice, so that was 5-0. The motion passes 5-0 in favor. Thank you. We'll move along then, Ms. Mokarak, to item number 9 on which is entitled Public Works. We have a work session, an introduction to Senate Bill 762, implementation and update on the fire siting standards, code modernization, etc. And Mr. Mokrajski, your panel includes today Rachel Surslev. Mr. Mokrajski.
And I think Rachel has this item, so Rachel will turn it over to you to walk the board through this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mokrajski, and good morning, Chair Farr and Commissioners. I have a short presentation for you today, and so I'm gonna start sharing my screen here. And can you all see that?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you.
Anyway, I'm sorry.
So today, before you to provide a work session on recently passed wildfire legislation, which is Senate Bill 762, and to provide an update on Lane County's fire siting standards code modernization project. And today I'm going to be discussing mainly the timelines outlined in this bill and the effect that they have on Lane County's work on the fire siting standards project. Generally, those aspects of the bill that affect the project are the statewide mapping of wildfire risk, statewide defensible space requirements, and potential changes to the statewide land use planning program. A little bit of legislation summary. Senate Bill 762 was passed by the legislature on June 26, 2021, and it became effective on July 19th, 2021. And the bill is quite extensive. It requires numerous regulatory and non-regulatory approaches to wildfire risk mitigation, most of which are require action by state agencies, but may have impact on local regulations. So as I mentioned, I'm going to go through the timelines outlined in this bill. The bill has many different sections with different agencies completing tasks on various timelines. And so I think it's most helpful to break this bill down by the timelines identified within it. And so in the next few slides, I'll take you through the initiatives of the bill, the deadlines for certain tasks and the agencies that will complete those tasks, and talk about the implications that may have on the county's projects. So first and foremost, the bill required that by last October 27, 2021, that the Board of Forestry identify a definition for the wildland urban interface. And this is important because how this term is defined has impacts on how the statewide mapping of wildfire risk is going to be completed. And so this definition has been identified, and I have it up there on the screen for you. Currently, there is a rulemaking advisory committee that's working to define the individual aspects of this definition. It's a single sentence, and there's a lot to unpack there. So there is still work being done on this definition to figure out how it will influence the statewide wildfire risk maps. And the second deadline on this slide is June 30th, 2022, which relates to those wildfire risk maps that the Oregon Department of Forestry and Oregon State University are going to be working on mapping wildfire risk on a statewide basis. And this risk will be classified into 5 different risk categories, including extreme, high, moderate, low, and no risk. And I'll just mention that several other parts of the bill are dependent on this mapping. The bill requires certain defensible space standards, certain building codes related to wildfire mitigation, and has some impact on Senate Bill 391 for rural accessory dwelling units. And so the mapping is really the backbone and has a lot of connection to various other parts of the bill. And so that will be done in June of this year. Moving on, there's some implications for land use regulations, and by October 1st of 2022, the Department of Land Conservation and Development must identify updates to the statewide land use planning program to incorporate wildfire risk maps and minimize wildfire risk. And this part of the bill is pretty brief. There's discussion of minimizing wildfire risk through defensible space standards, building codes, safe evacuation standards, and other development considerations. And it's possible that, or the possible implications for the county with this requirement is that there could be changes to the statewide land use planning program, which would require future amendments to Lane County's Rural Comprehensive Plan and possibly to Lane Code or Lane County's Development Code. And I'll just note here that given that the bill does require evaluation of the statewide planning program, and Lane County is in the early stages of making code amendments related to wildfire mitigation, staff feels that it's important to be closely tracking this work that the Department of Land Conservation and Development is doing, because we really want to be tracking what effect these changes at the statewide or at the state level may be having on local code amendments that we're working on. And by continuing to track the bill implementation in relation to our fire siting standards project, we can hopefully incorporate any changes enacted by the state and avoid any redundant code amendment projects. I will just touch a little bit on building codes. There's some discussion of building codes in this bill, and the bill requires that by October 1st of 2022, that the Department of Consumer and Business Services, who's the agency that handles building codes, must adopt and amend wildfire hazard mitigation building code standards These standards do currently exist, but they don't apply to Lane County because we don't have any zoning regulations related to wildfire risk currently. However, once the statewide wildfire risk maps are adopted, these building codes may be applicable in Lane County, where lands are designated as high or extreme risk in the wildland urban interface. And the last deadline I'll talk about is for defensible space requirements. The bill requires that by December 31st of 2022, the state fire marshal must establish minimum statewide defensible space standards. And this is also linked to the wildfire risk mapping. So for areas having high or extreme risk within the wildland urban interface, these certain defensible space standards will apply in those areas. And I wanted to note here implications for the county is that the bill provides several options for the administration of these standards. The state fire marshal is tasked with identifying what the standards are, but the bill provides an option for local jurisdictions or local fire districts to administer these standards. We haven't had any conversations with the state fire marshal quite yet about what route will be taken, but we understand that this will probably be a collaborative decision between the local government and the state fire marshal and the local fire districts to determine who are going to administer these standards. And so once we have more information from the fire marshal on this topic, we'll likely be returning to the board for an update to have some discussion on who will be administering these standards. And lastly, the other important aspect of this bill is the intersection of 762 with Senate Bill 391, which is the Rural Accessory Dwelling Units bill. And the Senate Bill 391 is the bill that allows accessory dwelling units in rural Lane County areas. And Senate Bill 391 has a specific provision that indicates that ADUs cannot be allowed until the statewide wildfire risk maps are approved. And that deadline is June 30th of 2022. So we won't have those risk maps until June, which means we can't implement this rural ADU bill. Another important note is that ADUs within the wildland urban interface area, which won't be identified until June, must also comply with the state fire marshal's defensible space standards. And we won't know what those defensible space standards are until December. So we are tracking this intersection of these two bills, given the importance of the rural ADU bill. And staff is working to schedule a follow-up work session with the board specifically on the rural ADU bills, because there's a lot of policy direction in that bill that we can start working on and get questions answered from the board. So we're hoping to start that project next month with a work session with you all. And I'll just note that, as I said earlier, staff is going to continue to monitor the work in regards to the statewide mapping and the potential changes to the statewide land use planning program resulting from the Senate bill. And we'll be tracking that and hope to resume work on the fire siting standards project when we know more about those state initiatives. It could be as early as June when the risk maps are adopted, or we may need to wait until changes to the statewide planning program. We should be having an update on from DLCD in October on that. So staff plans to continue tracking those initiatives and update the board accordingly. And that concludes my report today, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Chair, you're muted.
Once again, you've missed some brilliant words, so I'll restate them. Thank you, Ms. Surslev, and that I believe, concludes the staff report. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. Then I will begin to look to the queue for questions, but just ever so briefly, I'm going to mention this. I see no hands raised, so I'm not jumping. Something that you said, Ms. Surslep, we are closely tracking due to the importance of the rural ADU bill, which is Senate Bill 391. And you've stated that we are beginning forming the foundation of policy even prior to being able to implement 391, waiting for 762 to the June 22nd date, June 30th, 2022. I kind of stumbled through that. What I wanted to say is thank you for keeping the rural ADU high on the list of importance, because I believe the entire Board of County Commissioners is standing behind that. I stand corrected if anybody has any corrections for me on that. Then I'm going to look to the queue. I see Vice Chair Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. Just a quick question. Is there any opportunity, or would it be useful to engage either, starting over, is there any committee work being done on this so that when a recommendation comes from it, it also includes input from community members, our planning commission, or any other advisory board or commission that's working with staff to bring us recommendations?
Yes, for sure. We have been, staff has been staying involved in any committees, rulemaking committees that we can. I mentioned the rulemaking advisory committee regarding the definition of the Wildland urban interface. We've been attending those meetings and providing input when we feel necessary. There is also a committee that the Department of Land Conservation and Development is forming to get input on the changes to the statewide land use planning program, and staff has applied to be on that committee. I think there's a certain number of positions that can be filled, so we don't know if we'll be on it yet, but we are making the efforts to be involved in the rulemaking.
Thank you. I guess I'm asking also our county advisory boards and commissions, like our planning commission or any other advisory board or commission that we have here at Lane County that's working with staff on this.
I don't believe our planning commission has been directly involved in this bill. And other than that, I'm not sure what other committee would be involved.
Rachel, I can mention as well, we'll be working with the Planning Commission. We have gone to them previously with some trainings on fire siting standards to provide them with background information to prepare them for future work sessions and hearings. And once we further scope some of the questions associated with implementing Senate Bill 762, as well as draft some of the language, we'll absolutely be doing outreach and working with the Planning Commission and having work sessions with them.
Thank you, Ms. Bell.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. So Senate Bill 762 has so much in it, and we know this is just one angle that touches us in a way in which we were trying to go down a direction of having fire siting standards updated, but there's a lot more to Senate Bill 762, and it will unfold really over time as there's so many state agencies and committees working on it. It sounds like we'll be able to at least get to the ADU updates for the county this summer, but it sounds like from what you presented today is that our fire siting standards may not come back to us perhaps even by the end of this particular year. Am I off on expectations? I just want us to be aware of what the change in timeline truly in reality will be, given that this bill really impacts, and it impacts what you do to update those codes, and we don't want you to do work and then have to redo it again and waste all that time and energy.
Yes. So to put it plainly, it does delay our hoped timeline for the fire siting standards project, because this bill has so many aspects that impact what we aim to do with that project. I would say you're correct in that this would be at least pushed out till later. The fire siting standards project would at least be pushed out until later this year, because mainly because of the two deadlines that I mentioned. The first in June with the wildfire risk maps, I think, is a really important deadline to be tracking, because without knowing what risk classification the lands in Lane County fall under, we're kind of in the dark on what implications this bill will have on the fire siting standards project. So I would say that's the first main timeline that we're tracking. And then the second would be the report that DLCD is going to generate on the changes to the statewide planning program, because those changes may also have impact on the land use regulations that we're adopting or trying to adopt.
Thank you, Commissioner Buck and Ms. Surslov and Ms. Bell. Commissioner Burney.
Given the time, thank you, Chair. Given the time frames involved, I just want to say, let us hope and pray we don't have more wildfires this summer that would further delay the kinds of things that are being looked at, because it would impact them even further. That's just one point. Another two quick points. One is, when I truly didn't know what I was doing, the first motion I made on the AOC board was to approve the ADU in rural areas piece of what's now evolved into this. So I don't want to claim credit because it was not knowledgeable, but it's fun to see how some of those things take time, but they really do happen over time. And then finally, I just want to make you aware, Rachel, that there are a group in the climate advisory body that are looking at the intersection of climate and fire. And that might be a good group also to touch base with, just to get their input or provide whatever training they need. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Burney. I see no further hands in the queue. Commissioner Bozovich is still with us. Any further staff report, Ms. Surslov?
No, that's all for me. Thank you.
And you need no action today. We'll continue to look for reports and listen for reports. Good work on this, moving things forward and continuing to move the things that are in parallel with it that cannot really cross the line until this one's moved forward. It's a delicate balance that you're achieving there. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Mr. Mokrasky, we'll move along then in our agenda to item number 10, which is County Council announcements. Mr. Dingle, are you with us? Then we'll move along to County Administration. Mr. Mokrasky, announcements.
Thank you, Chair. I just have one item I wanted to update the board on, and we've talked a little bit about this. Sorry, just pulling up my notes here. At the budget kickoff earlier in January, we shared with the board our plans to recommend the creation of a new department that brings together youth services and parole and probation. We spent a lot of time working with leaders and staff in the organization, as well as community partners on this. And I just wanted to provide a reminder to the board, and as we're beginning to make some of those adjustments that you will see in the proposed budget, and as we have some shifting that's happening within the organization, I just wanted to keep everyone in the loop on that. So we will be recommending the creation of a new department that brings together youth services and parole and probation. I've asked Greg Rickoff, who has served as our Chief Operations Officer in Lane County for the past several years. I've asked Greg to serve as the interim director of this new department over the course of the better part of the next year. And although many of those changes won't occur until the next fiscal year, because this will be a proposal that we're making in the budget, we are beginning that process of developing, bringing these groups together, if not physically together, beginning to identify opportunities for collaboration, for training, and development support. So Greg will oversee the work of these two divisions. He started that And in order to allow Greg the time to take on this new role, we've asked Lauren Blythe, who is our Technology Services Business Services Division Manager, to step in as the Interim Director of Operations. So Lauren will take on leading the clerk's function, our finance division, our facilities and capital projects. You may note that the new Department of Youth Services and Parole and Probation has not yet been named. And that is because we're engaging the divisions to collaborate on choosing a department name. And as soon as we've landed on that, we will report back to you. So I just wanted to provide that update that you'll continue to see Mr. Rickoff, but in a new role temporarily, and you will see Mr. Blythe, who will be stepping in to oversee the divisions that I mentioned. So we're excited about these changes, feel like they have a lot. It's consistent with the continued growth and development and evolution of Lane County and our various pieces that are critical to serving the needs in our community. And so look forward to seeing the benefits from those moves. Happy to answer any questions, but that was the one brief update I wanted to share with all of you.
Fantastic update. Thank you, Ms. Smokreisky. Any questions from the board? I see Vice Chair Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to briefly appreciate the creativity and thoughtfulness that went into looking at this combining of departments. I mentioned last week that I was able to tour our new parole and probation facility out at Four Corners, and I just think this is just another example of the shift nationally, but here locally, that we're making to really understand what a public safety system looks like that's focused on people's best opportunity and giving people every opportunity to recover and rehabilitate and reintegrate with dignity, and focusing on youth and bringing those departments together, I think is just fantastic, and really appreciate everyone's work on that.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I see no further comments, Ms. Smokreisky. Thank you very much for that information. We have no executive session this morning. We will be conducting an executive session this afternoon, at which point I'm certain that Mr. Dingle will be joining us, and we'll step back to item 10A, which is County Council announcements. Do we have any other business before the board prior to recess for the morning? I see none. We will, at the sound of my gavel, we will recess the Board of County Commissioners, and we will reconvene at 1:30 in remote session.